She didn't say it to my face. She wrote it in her planner, Tuesday, 4:15. Dr. Keller, intake. No explanation, just a calendar entry. Pink ink, 2 underlines, same pen she used for PTA meetings and orthodontist appointments. I was 15. My name is Eva Lennox. I lived in a suburban 2-story outside Pittsburgh. Honor roll, no behavior record. The kind of girl who didn't make noise until silence became a problem. They called me moody. What they meant was I stopped smiling at dinner. The waiting room was always cold, gray carpet, coffee machine that never worked. My mother filled out the intake paperwork, ticking boxes like she was ordering a meal. Difficulty regulating emotions. Resistant to feedback. She added a note. Considering medication. Dr. Keller was quiet. Cardigan, flat shoes, soft voice. She asked, "Do you know why you're here?" I said yes. She waited. I said nothing else. She made a note. That became the rhythm. Dr. Keller asked questions like, "How's your home environment?" I gave answers that hovered just above honest. My mother waited in the car, always on her phone, always ready to explain my progress to friends over wine. By the 3rd session, I knew this wasn't about healing. It was about control. Therapy was their shield, their way to say, "She's getting help." Not, "We don't like when she challenges us." They didn't want better. They wanted obedient. I gave them what they wanted, composure. I said, "I'm fine" on command. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resist, because resistance gives them ammunition. But I started writing things down, session notes, keywords, phrases Keller repeated. I memorized her pen pressure, the way she underlined inconsistencies between what I said and what they claimed. Client reports confusion around punishments. Parental description of behavior lacks context. Recommend continued observation. She didn't confront them, but she didn't believe them either. And neither did I. The most honest moment came 6 weeks in. Dr. Keller asked, "Do you feel safe at home?" I said yes. She didn't write it down. That was when I realized she already knew the truth lived somewhere else. Not in what I said, but in how I said it and what I didn't. I left that day and added one more sentence to my notes. This isn't therapy. It's surveillance. So I started documenting everything. Dates, language, the things my mother told Keller versus the texts she sent me when no one was watching. They didn't know I was collecting. They thought they were writing the only version. They were wrong. They thought silence meant progress. It meant strategy. After that 6th session, I realized words weren't for honesty. They were ammunition. Anything I said could be rephrased, reframed, and returned to me in my mother's voice. So I stopped giving her anything to use. Instead, I paid attention. I listened to how she described me to Dr. Keller. She's always on edge. She twists things. We're just trying to help her grow up. Then I'd get in the car, and she'd say, "You're lucky we care enough to do this." Or, "If you'd stop overreacting, we wouldn't need therapy." She never used the word control. She didn't have to. By session 10, I understood the routine. Dr. Keller asked about my week, my feelings, my family. I answered calmly, never too short, never too open. She took notes, always with a black pen, always in even lines. One day I asked if I could see the notes. She hesitated, said, "You can request a copy through the front desk." I filed that information away. That weekend, I borrowed my mom's login to the insurance portal. She'd written her password on the back of an electric bill. I found the therapy billing codes, date-stamped, labeled, each with a diagnostic tag, F93.89, other specified childhood emotional disorder, every session. I copied the list. They didn't know I had a printer in my closet. After that, I started keeping a digital folder, /vault/therapy extracts/inside, screenshots of calendar appointments, scanned handwritten notes, emails between my parents and Dr. Keller's office, anything that referenced me, anything that told a different story than the one I lived, because there were always two versions of me, the one they described in the waiting room. She's cold, secretive, always trying to manipulate the truth. And the one I knew, observant, quiet, calculated only because being candid had become dangerous. I stopped trying to explain that. Instead, I started noticing tone, the way Dr. Keller asked questions differently after solo sessions, less assuming, less passive. Once, she asked if I ever felt like people tried to make me into someone I wasn't. I looked at her for 3 seconds. Then I said, "I don't think that question would be allowed in my house." She didn't blink, but she wrote something down. I memorized that too. At home, my parents changed tactics. My mother said things like, "You're so much better now," or "See what happens when you cooperate?" I nodded. That was my job now, nonverbal obedience. My father was less subtle. He praised the therapist. "She's pulling the poison out," he said once, like I was the infected limb. I added that to the file, word for word. That year, the sessions continued. The therapist's questions became sharper, less about me, more about them. What happens when you disagree with your parents? Has anyone ever apologized to you at home? Do you feel heard? I answered with restraint. But every answer carried an edge I didn't sand down anymore. Keller noticed. She didn't say it. She didn't have to. She started underlining again. I kept listening everywhere. To my brother, when he asked why I got special treatment. To my aunt, when she said I was a lot to handle. To my teachers, who told my parents I was smart but withdrawn. I filed it all, not just to survive, to prepare. Because one day I'd need to tell the truth, and when I did, I wasn't going to ask for permission. I was going to cite sources. It started with a server error. I was 19, home for a long weekend. My mother insisted on calling family reconnection. She made lasagna. My father stayed on his phone. My brother asked if I was still doing that therapy blog thing. I wasn't, but I let him think I was. That night, I used the family desktop to print a boarding pass. The printer didn't work. A dialog box popped up, storage sync, login required. I clicked without thinking. It auto-filled. My mother's username, her cloud credentials, synced from a forgotten backup she hadn't touched in years. I didn't hesitate. Inside, folders. Insurance 2020, Keller correspondence, Eva follow-ups. I didn't open them immediately. I transferred them to a USB drive, took it back to my dorm, waited until midnight. Then I opened the first file. It was an email from my mother to Dr. Keller, dated 2 years after I stopped therapy. Subject line, "For your reference in case she contacts you." The body was short. "Just so you're aware, Eva has been rewriting things. She's telling people therapy didn't help and that we forced her into it. I know you can't share anything specific, but if she does reach out, I hope you'll keep in mind the bigger picture. We just want to protect her." There was no bigger picture, just a system of polite deception. That folder had more than emails. It had PDFs, session summaries, some edited, some unedited. One had tracked changes. I wasn't supposed to see it, but I read every word. Dr. Keller's original note, "Client's version of events continues to conflict with parental framing. Recommend individual sessions with minimal external influence." The revised version, sent back to her from an internal admin system. Client demonstrates narrative distortion and oppositional thinking. Consider structured family sessions. The edits were subtle, professional, but I knew exactly what they did. They'd rewritten the story in real time. It wasn't just therapy, it was content curation. I checked timestamps, email chains, metadata. Some notes had multiple versions. I started lining them up. Version 1. Client expresses distrust toward home environment. Version 2. Client struggles with trust and boundaries. They flipped it, not facts, implications. Then I found the export folder, session audio clips. I didn't even know Keller recorded, but she had. Not every session, just a few, labeled by date, some less than 2 minutes. One lasted 17. The one from March 11th stood out. I remembered that day. It was the first time I'd asked, what happens if a parent lies during therapy? In the audio, Keller pauses before answering. Then she says, then therapy becomes containment, not care. I played it twice. She knew. Even then. She couldn't say it outright, but the sentence sat in the room like a warning. I copied that clip, saved it in 5 locations, encrypted 2 of them, printed the transcript, highlighted the line. Because this wasn't about proving they hurt me. This was about showing how. The mechanics, the edits, the performance. It wasn't loud. It was practiced. They didn't scream. They suggested. They didn't deny. They rewrote. And they thought I'd forget the drafts. They were wrong. I didn't seek her out. She emailed me. Subject line. Checking in, if that's okay. It had been 5 years since our last session. I was 24, living in D.C., working as an editorial researcher for a nonprofit think tank, fact-checking legislation briefs and policy statements for inconsistencies. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her message was cautious. I don't mean to intrude. I just came across something you'd written online, an essay about memory and systems, and it made me wonder if you'd want to reconnect. No pressure. She didn't mention my family. She didn't mention therapy. She used the word systems. That told me she'd read it closely. I didn't reply right away. I pulled up the essay she referenced. It was a personal piece, anonymized, published under a contributor tag on a mid-sized mental health journal. I'd called it Compliance Culture. It talked about what happens when families outsource accountability to professionals while controlling the narrative. I reread it, line by line. Every word was neutral, unemotional, but she had recognized it. When I finally responded, I said, "Sure, I'm open to a conversation. Digital only, for now." We scheduled a video call. I expected pleasantries. I expected deflection. I didn't expect honesty. But Dr. Keller was different now. Older, hair shorter, still soft-voiced but sharper behind the eyes. Like someone who'd stopped trying to stay neutral when neutrality became dangerous. She said, "Before we talk, I want to clarify. You're not a client anymore, and I'm not here to therapize, just to listen." I nodded. She exhaled. Then she said, "Did you know I almost reported your mother?" The sentence hung there. I didn't react. She continued. "There was a moment, your 3rd session. You described a situation involving a punishment that didn't align with the behavior. I documented it. I escalated it to a clinical supervisor. But nothing happened. Because technically it wasn't abuse. It was rigid parenting. That was the phrase in the system, rigid parenting." She looked tired. "I reread those notes recently," she said. "I realized how much we missed." I didn't correct her. They didn't miss it. They managed it. I asked, "Why now?" She hesitated. Then, "Because I left that practice. And because I think what happened to you happens to more people than we admit, and we make it worse when we don't speak about it." She didn't apologize, But she didn't defend herself either. She said, "Do you still feel unsafe?" I paused. Then, "Not anymore." And that was the truth. I was no longer scared of my parents. I was scared of the system that had believed them, that had needed me to cooperate in my own mislabeling, that had turned surveillance into support, that had written me into reports as non-compliant when I didn't mirror the family narrative. She offered to help. "Not officially," she said. "But if you ever decide to write about it, I'll confirm what I can, privately." I thanked her, then asked one question. "Did you ever doubt me?" She didn't blink. "No." Then she ended the call, and I opened a new document. Titled it, "When You're the Symptom of a Sick System." They always told stories at parties. Funny ones, rehearsed ones. My mother loved the one about how I cried on my first day of school, even though she knew I hadn't. My father exaggerated how I once threw a fit over a lost calculator. They laughed while retelling it, called it a phase. Everyone smiled, and I stayed quiet. Because what was I supposed to say? That didn't happen? That wasn't a fit. It was panic after 3 nights of missed meals and being blamed for a broken appliance I didn't touch? Silence was safer. Until I had the notes. Until I had proof. The session summaries, the email edits, the audio clip with Dr. Keller's voice calmly explaining that therapy without honesty becomes containment. The metadata, the timestamps, the contradictions. I didn't confront them. I annotated them. I pulled their public posts, their family group texts, the Facebook captions beneath every smiling photo with the hashtag #, healing together, and I started matching them to my records. Example, so proud of Eva for finishing high school strong. Even when things were hard, she never gave up on herself. My note. Posted June 2014, 2 weeks after they threatened to withhold my phone unless I recanted what I told Dr. Keller about the silent treatment after Christmas. Another? Text from my mother to her friend Ruth. "We've tried everything. She just wants to be angry." My note. Sent the day after I refused to sign the therapy compliance form they drafted to show the school counselor. Everything had a trail. They just didn't think I'd follow it. They assumed I'd move on, bury it, rewrite my own memory out of shame or fatigue. Instead, I treated it like research. I created a master document. 3 columns, statement/source/contradiction. I logged 82 entries. The final one was a scanned note from Dr. Keller. Client expresses persistent sense of being misrepresented. Parents appear unaware of discrepancy. I highlighted that sentence, then moved it to the top of the file. That became my thesis, because when I sat down to write the op-ed, I didn't start with rage. I started with a footnote. I wrote the piece in 2 sittings. Title, "When You're the Symptom of a Sick System." I didn't name anyone. Not my therapist, not my parents, not my town, not my school, but the events were precise, the dates real, the story uncomfortably familiar. I included direct quotes from altered documents, redacted but traceable. I explained how therapy can become a tool of silence when families seek validation instead of accountability. I wrote like I was building a case, because I was. By the time I submitted it, the draft had 38 citations. I stripped most of them before publishing, left only what mattered. I submitted under a pseudonym, E.L. Rowan. The piece went live 2 weeks later on a mid-size platform known for long-form essays. I didn't promote it. But it found traction, retweets, shares, quiet DMs from strangers saying, "This happened to me too." That was all I needed. I wasn't trying to be heard by my family. I was trying to be undeniable. It didn't go viral. It went quietly structural, the way only precision does. No shouting, no hashtags, Just a single piece that hit the right inboxes. Counselors, adjunct therapists, one university professor who emailed me to ask if he could assign it in his trauma-informed care seminar. I said yes. The platform flagged it as editor's pick within a week, not for outrage, for clarity. They called it a case study in narrative control. I called it Tuesday. My mother didn't mention it, not directly. She posted a photo that week, an old picture of me on the porch, age 10, with the caption, "She was always so creative," wishing her peace in whatever she's building now. No tags, no names. I filed it under damage control, passive. My father stayed silent. He never addressed emotions anyway, just logistics. One day later, he emailed me a spreadsheet. Subject line, "Just so you're aware, 2023 taxes." I didn't reply, because now I was fluent in their deflection. The real message came from Ruth. Not a relative, not close, just one of those long-time family friends whose loyalty bled into complicity. She messaged me on Instagram, private, friendly. "Saw the piece. I'm sure your parents are hurting right now. They always tried their best. Maybe next time, consider talking things out." I read it twice. Then I deleted it, because Ruth didn't ask what happened. She asked why I told. The therapist network picked it up. 1 week after publication, Dr. Keller emailed me again. Short. Professional. "You were braver than I was. Thank you." That mattered. Because she had seen the erasure firsthand and still waited 5 years to speak plainly. But when she did, she didn't ask for absolution, just understanding. That's what differentiated her. That and the way she never asked me to soften the truth to make the audience comfortable. The story kept circulating, quietly, not viral, vetted. I started seeing phrases I had written show up in other essays. One person quoted my line about containment. Another mentioned the phrase weaponized politeness in a podcast about family systems therapy. No one asked if it was true. They just recognized it. Because it wasn't a unique trauma, it was a common one. I wasn't the exception. I was just the one who documented it. My family didn't reach out, they never disputed it publicly, but 1 week later, my cousin Mia tagged me in a Facebook comment that was quickly deleted. It said, "Everyone has a version, I guess." That was the closest thing I got to acknowledgement. Not "we read it," not "we regret it," just everyone has a version, but I didn't write a version. I wrote a record. They made me the symptom. I showed them the system. They used therapy as a smokescreen. I turned it into a mirror. And the truth didn't need a name to cut. It just needed clarity. They never said my name. Not in public. Not in apology. Just silence, wrapped in curated distance. My mother started referring to me as our oldest when people asked. My father didn't refer to me at all. They didn't dispute the article. They didn't acknowledge the evidence. They didn't even try to discredit the quotes, because they knew I'd kept everything, and they knew I would use it. The last time we were in the same room, I didn't speak. It was a funeral, my grandfather's, a room filled with starch, perfume, and strategically blurred memories. They hugged me like a duty, introduced me to extended family like I was visiting from another orbit. "She's doing something in media," my mother said. I didn't correct her. She didn't mention the essay. She didn't mention the quiet panic that followed its publication when 3 of her friends stopped replying to her inspirational group chats. When a local therapist she once quoted in a church newsletter publicly shared the op-ed with the caption, "This is what accountability looks like when the victim stays organized," she unfriended him. I kept the screenshot. They tried to reduce me to an ungrateful daughter, but the inbox didn't agree. I got emails from therapists, educators, survivors, some asking to quote me, others just saying, "I thought I was alone. You put words to something I've been told wasn't real. I never thought to keep records. I wish I had." That was the moment I realized I hadn't just survived a gaslit childhood, I had mapped it. And now, others could walk that path backward, not to relive it, but to understand it. I turned the essay into a series, 6 pieces, each one deconstructing a different tool of familial silencing. When compliance becomes a currency, emotional abuse in the language of care, the manipulation of therapy access. They spread, no virality, no drama, just momentum. By the time my piece was assigned in a graduate psychology course, my last name was gone from their system. I'd changed it legally. Eva Lennox became Eva Rowan. A clean break, no ceremony. They didn't deserve the credit line. The woman I became didn't come from them. She came from the blank spaces between their stories, the omissions, the edits, the compliance they mistook for healing. Sometimes I get asked if I'll ever forgive them. I say nothing, because forgiveness implies they tried to change, tried to understand, tried to speak without managing the optics. They didn't. They still tell stories, still post selective family photos, still host holiday dinners where my absence is blamed on work. I let them, because they're not my audience anymore. The truth doesn't need to fight to exist. It just needs to be documented, and I did that. I wasn't their mistake, I was their mirror, and they couldn't stand the reflection.